So that leads me to my next question. And I'll start from Miss Ene Ameh. So, what practical steps do you think that the government officials, school owners, and even teachers can take to bring in this co-creation among our students and youth generally? In case you're wondering, why are we talking about youth? Why are we talking about co-creation? The theme for the International Day of Education is the power of youth in co-creating education. And I feel like it is very important because we need to build system, we need to build structures with these people. Yeah, so back to the question, what are the practical steps we can take to co-create to ensure that we are building a classroom, or we are building school structure system that brings everybody together? And this is not just limited to just teachers alone. I know we've talked about teachers. I also want to hear, what do you think the government can do? These are conversations we can definitely publish, put out there, and from what we are doing, from conversations we are having, government officials, policy makers are seeing solutions to issues happening in the education system. Same, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Evelyn. That's a very loaded question. So I'll try to unpack as best as I can. Let's start with the government. I think the government has a very central role, a role that transcends into the classroom when it comes to co-creation. Just talking about when we say co-creation, that means there's creation that is happening, and then there's the collaboration side to it, right? So we need to start first at the part of what are we creating exactly. And when we talk about what we are creating, I like to think about creating an education system or an education provision that fits the aspirations of the youth. So those dreams, those hopes, those ambitions of the youth, that's what we're trying to create, right? Before we talk about people coming together, teachers coming together, students coming together to do that. So the first takeoff point as a people, so starting off with the government, is asking ourselves, what are we really creating? And that goes right to the bottom of teacher education. And I think the government, in our setting in Nigeria, the government is the central teacher training provider, right? We have many colleges of education, many federal institutions that are teacher training colleges. And in the recent times, we have private organizations who have delved into teacher training, post-uni or post-secondary teacher training, and then consultants that have also delved into teacher training. But the bulk of it still rests with the government. So what I would see as the role the government can play in facilitating this co-creation is, first of all, to think about the creation. What are we creating? What is the content of our education like? And what is the content of our teacher training curriculum? So you would find that many teachers who come into the classrooms are not prepared or trained to have meaningful relationships with students that would facilitate that co-creation to happen. And because they're not trained, that doesn't happen, that doesn't translate to that co-creation happening in their classrooms or in their schools. So I would say the first takeoff point will be for the government to provide that enabling environment, first of all, for co-creation to happen at the colleges of education. So we're talking about rethinking the content and the structure of our colleges of education. How are our teachers trained? What is the philosophy behind the methods that are used by the lecturers there? Because a lot of times, if we really check, co-creation is not even happening at that level. So I think that's where our government can come in, rethinking co-creation in colleges of education, rethinking the content, the what and the how of teacher training, and that in no small measure will translate into what it looks like in schools. Because in schools, we need teachers who are empathetic. We need teachers who connect with students. We need teachers who don't think the learners are passive recipients of knowledge, right? So if that happens from when they have received teacher training, we find that's more likely to happen when they are also delivering instruction. I would say that co-creating should start where our teachers are trained. And that's the government to design what that teacher training should look like. And here at this time, it would also be with those who are being trained, because we are thinking about the end result. What are their aspirations? What are the end goals? What are the dreams of what teaching should look like, or what kind of teacher they want to aspire to be? So I think the onus rests on the government to set off the ball rolling. And I think it would be like a domino effect at the end of the day, where that same kind of setup of co-creation will translate into their classrooms, where even with designing rubrics and assessments, they're doing it alongside their students, because they have had a training that didn't just provide them a model, but helped them to experience that same thing when they were teachers in training.
Hmm. Wow, thank you so much. So Ms. Rita is involved with special needs children, and I want to hear from her perspective. And now let's talk about, and this is now leading us to like inclusion. And we have seen a lot of videos, a lot of testimonies about special needs children doing great things in the education system, a lot of them doing marvelously well. But I want Ms. Rita to say something about that. So, how do you think that? What are the practical steps that you think government can take, school owners, teachers can take, in also including this set of people into co-creating in education system? Because I know most times they are always quote and unquote sidelined when it comes to decision making, right? So I want you to help us see into that as a special need educator. What do you think are the practical steps that we can bring in this set of people, this unique set of people, into co-creation in education?
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Okay, just to pitch in on the special education thing. A lot of times, and we can see that Mr. Bamido talked about policy, and that's the conversation that we haven't been having. That whole policy part of sitting down and talking to teachers about what really should be on the table. I remember having a conversation a few years ago just about special needs children and WAEC, and I was asking questions regarding what are the provisions for these students. So some schools have gone ahead to incorporate special education needs departments in their schools. They have provided the support, they have trained their teachers, they have given the children opportunities to have modified work or accommodations. But then they get to this point where they have to write external exams, and there's no form of support. There's no form of recognition that they exist and their needs exist. So I think it goes back to that policy part of not just policy, but even implementation of what does it mean to cater to the students with additional needs? What does it mean to cater to students with special needs? If you really look around a lot of our special needs schools in Nigeria, the students are abandoned in the sense that they're not provided for towards reaching some of these goals that other typical not neurodivergent learners are able to meet. And it is not for want of the fact that they can't reach these goals or they can't write this exam, but certain things need to be put in place that are not put in place. And many times schools cannot have those conversations. Schools cannot have those arguments with bodies, international or national bodies like WAEC, NECO, or JAM, because the policies do not exist to back them up. So we're back to that whole, yes, the government can sit down with bodies that represent special education or people with disabilities, with schools that cater to special education. And I think as teachers that deal with special education needs, we need to also come to that point where we form an advocacy group, we form a pressure group, and we make sure these conversations begin to happen.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I don't know if Mr. Bamido has anything to say.
So, in my own perspective, I think it will be for the regulation, the government's role that can, when we talk about special needs children and in terms of their own type of education, I think the regulations will be a critical aspect we need to look into. Because the regulation means that they must be told what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it. It's not that school A is doing this kind of stuff, school B is doing this kind of stuff, school C is doing this kind of stuff. It should be a uniform thing for all of them to work the same way. Because if we're talking about co-creation, we're trying to bring all of them together, all the special needs schools in Nigeria. So there must be a regulatory body that is assigned to do this so that all of them must work together as teams. so that they can achieve that common goal. I've not been a special needs teacher before, but I do understand that if a regulation is placed on how they operate, it will be best for all of them. Because if they are operating in isolation or differently, you can't achieve what we are trying to do, what we are even saying before creating in education, especially when it comes to special needs. The idea of regulation must be there, set up to monitor these schools so that they should maybe agree or accept the rules and regulations, how to operate, and how these learners are being taught, how they can come together to work as a team, something like that. I think that's my perspective.
Thank you so much, sir. We've really talked a lot about policy, and I think these are important conversations we should be having in the education system. I see Miss Rita on the call. Can you hear me now?
Sorry for the breaks over time. Okay, so if we look at it, we find out that in special education is not really known here in Nigeria. And if you look at it, when you talk about curriculum, if you look at the curriculum design, you find out that these children, they didn't create any platform where children with dyslexia, where children with ADHD, where children with autism can be able to learn. There was nothing, because the government assumed every child would learn the same way, forgetting that we are all diverse learners. Nobody learns the same way. So the government probably assumed that everybody would learn a certain way and just created a curriculum that just benefited certain group of learners. And then we find these ones coming up in the society, and then everybody is running helter-skelter. How do we help these ones? Now, to become co-creators and able to help these ones in the special needs sector, I think the government should include special need educators and therapists in policy designs. When it comes to curriculum making, those ones who are trained in the special education world, you ask them, consult them. How do we help these ones? How do we help these children learn? For me, I feel the school should be inclusive, where children with autism, where children with ADHD are able to learn. So this whole assumption of everybody should learn a certain way should stop. Government now should include these people, special educators and therapists, so that we can tell them, okay, this is how different types of learners learn. I work with children with dyslexia, and when I work with them, I found out that no one child learns the same way. So I have a book where I write down different types of learner, different types of structures or designs I can actually produce or create to help these people with dyslexia come up. I'm not running helter-skelter because I've already listed out different types of disabilities and how I can help them. So I just pick out from one structure. So if government should include therapists and special educators, it makes the work very easy. We actually see therapists suggesting AC tools. We are creating out different platforms like IEPs. It's called an individualized educational plan. This is a design document that contains the needs of the learners. So we are not now using the normal curriculum. We are not using the normal scheme of work to work with this kind of learners. Secondly, I think the government should also fund inclusive education properly. Call parents, call therapists. How do we help? What should we do? Funding should be there. If we actually are able to fund the special education sector, we find out that everything is going to run smoothly. We find out that education is actually going to be great in Nigeria. We don't have to now start traveling out of the country to look for a better system of education. Therapists, special educators, parents, curriculum designers, everyone should come together, put their heads together, and they are asking, okay, what can we do to help these learners? Because I can give you about 30 testimonies of learners who have become better just because there was a space for them. They were given an opportunity to air their views. Okay, this is how I learn best. I'm an auditory learner, and this is the tools I need for learning best. My hands-on learners, these are the tools that I need best. So I think if government should include special educators, parents, and therapists in the policy designs, I think these people can actually become co-creators in special education, and education will become better in Nigeria.